There are two kinds of exhaustion, the kind that sleep can cure and the kind that sleep cannot touch. You felt it, that heaviness in your chest that no rest seems to reach. You wake, but still feel half buried. You breathe, but the air feels thin, as if your soul is holding its breath. This isn't tiredness of the body. It's the weight of a soul that's forgotten its own depth. A fatigue that whispers, something inside you has gone unheard. Carl Jung once wrote that what you resist persists. He wasn't speaking about mere stress or fatigue, he was describing the silent war between the surface of your life and the depths you refuse to see. For years you've been told to stay positive, to keep your head up, to move on. And so you did. You smiled when you were breaking. You spoke lightly when your heart was heavy. You built an identity strong enough to survive, but not soft enough to feel. The world applauds that strength, but strength without awareness becomes a mask, a porcelain face over a trembling spirit. And when you live too long behind that mask, something ancient in you begins to ache. It's not depression, not exactly despair. It's a spiritual depletion, the slow draining of meaning. Your soul has been speaking through fatigue, asking for something the mind has long silenced. Because deep beneath your personality, beneath your habits and your stories, there lives a stranger, a silent twin, the one you buried when you decided to become acceptable, successful, admirable. Jung called this the shadow. It is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is simply the part of you that refused to die. The unlived truth that waits in darkness. When you ignore it, it starves. When you deny it, it haunts. And when you finally dare to face it, it transforms. This silent fatigue that no sleep can heal is your soul trying to wake you, not to another morning, but to another self. So before you rush to fix your life, before you numb the pain or chase another distraction, pause. Listen. That ache you feel isn't weakness. It's the sound of your spirit remembering what it came here to do. The journey ahead will not be comfortable. But if you walk through the weariness instead of away from it, you may discover that what you called exhaustion was actually the beginning of your awakening. You try to push through it, the fatigue, the quiet ache behind every conversation. You tell yourself it's just overwork, too many responsibilities, too little rest. But somewhere in the pauses between your own thoughts, you know it's something else. You've tried meditation, gratitude, discipline, every light you can shine to keep the darkness at bay. But the truth is, no matter how bright the light becomes, a part of you still feels unseen. You scroll through the illusions of other lives, smiles, achievements, beauty, and somewhere inside you whisper, "Why do I still feel empty?" You are not weak, you are simply carrying too many selves. The one that pleases, the one that performs, the one that pretends to have healed. You have built them carefully, layer upon layer. Armors made of affirmation, politeness, and control. But every armor isolates you further from the trembling truth that longs to be held. Carl Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that is the heart of your struggle. You've learned to improve yourself, but not to accept yourself. You've mastered progress, but not presence. You repress your anger and call it peace. You bury your sadness and call it strength. You disguise your envy as humility and your fear as ambition. But these things do not disappear when denied. They rot in the basement of your being, whispering through fatigue, leaking through silence, turning your soul into a crowded house where no one speaks the truth. You've mistaken emotional numbness for maturity, but numbness isn't peace, it's paralysis, and every time you silence your pain, you also silence your joy. Modern life calls this resilience, but Jung would call it repression. A civilization of half-awake souls who've confused calm with disconnection. You were taught to choose light over darkness, but not to understand that both belong to the same sky. You were taught to run from the shadow, to bury everything that makes you uncomfortable. But what you bury alive will one day dig its way out. And so, the modern soul hides behind busyness, behind screens, behind purpose and productivity, fleeing the silence that could actually heal it. You say you're tired because the body feels heavy, but no. It's the spirit that has grown weary from pretending to be whole while denying half its truth. You look into mirrors and see only reflections you've crafted. The curated smile, the well-lit self, But if you dared to turn away from the glass, you'd see the shadow on the wall, the darker image following you, asking softly to be seen. That is a struggle, to face the part of you that no one applauds, to look at the reflection that doesn't fit the world's image of you. And yet, somewhere inside this quiet exhaustion, there is a whisper. This is not the end of me. That whisper is the first crack in the shell, the first sign that your pain has purpose, because every spiritual breakdown is also a doorway. You think you're breaking down, but perhaps you're simply being broken open. There comes a night in every soul when no amount of light can comfort you, when even silence feels too loud, when the life you've built, the habits, the identities, the achievements, suddenly feel like walls instead of shelter. And it's in that still, aching dark that the truth begins to reveal itself. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. He taught that a person does not heal by chasing perfection, but by embracing contradiction. That peace is not found in escaping the darkness, but in learning to live with it, to listen to it, to let it speak. We think enlightenment is light, but the real illumination comes when you turn toward the night and finally see what's been waiting there. Your sadness, your anger, your envy, they are not enemies of your spirit. They are parts of you waiting for recognition. Every repressed emotion is a message undelivered, a fragment of truth you weren't yet strong enough to hold. When you stop running from them, something miraculous happens. The things that once haunted you begin to guide you. Your loneliness reveals where you abandoned connection. Your jealousy points to the unlived potential you've ignored. Your fear shows you exactly where your courage is needed. This is the art of Carl Jung's philosophy, that the shadow is not darkness itself, but the disowned light hidden within it. You are not here to banish the shadow. You are here to integrate it, to make a home wide enough for both your wounds and your wonders. Think of the moon. It doesn't shine by denying its dark side, but by being whole, both light and shadow together. The human soul is the same. When you acknowledge what you've suppressed, you begin to reclaim your lost energy. The fatigue that felt endless starts to lift, not because life became easier, but because you stopped wasting energy on pretending to be someone you're not. Wholeness feels like rest. It's not the rest of escape, but the rest that comes from finally coming home. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." That digging is the work of integration, the descent into the caverns of the self. You cannot drink from the fountain if you refuse to dig into the earth that hides it. The shadow holds what you buried in shame, the child who felt unseen, the anger you silenced to be loved, the tears you swallowed so no one would call you weak. All of it still lives inside you, waiting not for judgment, but for compassion. You don't heal by fixing yourself, you heal by meeting yourself. The light of consciousness is not gentle. It burns through illusion, through pretense, through denial, but it also warms the soul that has lived too long in exile. This is the revelation. You are not tired because life is too heavy. You are tired because you've carried it alone, without the parts of you that were meant to help. When you integrate the shadow, you stop fighting against yourself. And that, at last, is freedom. Not the freedom to become perfect, but the freedom to be whole. So sit in the quiet and let the truth rise. Not the truth of the world, but the truth of your own depths. You will feel fear. That's natural, because you are standing at the edge of the life you thought you had to be and the life you were always meant to live. One self must die for another to be born. And when the walls of pretense finally crumble, what you will find beneath is not darkness. It is light, ancient, patient, and entirely your own. Integration begins not with grand change, but with small acts of honesty. When you stop lying to yourself about what you feel, what you fear, and what you need, the energy you once spent maintaining the mask returns to you as clarity. You start to see that what you called failure was often just misalignment. What you called weakness was the soul asking for gentleness. And what you called being lost was simply the beginning of finding depth. Carl Jung believed that transformation is not about becoming good. It's about becoming real. Because when you become real, the light in you no longer has to perform. Integration doesn't mean surrendering to darkness. It means befriending it. acknowledging that your anger, your fear, your envy carry information about who you are. They are emotional messengers, not moral failures. The path forward, then, is not suppression, but dialogue. When anger arises, ask, what boundary have I allowed to be crossed? When envy stirs, ask, what unlived dream am I ignoring? When fear speaks, ask, what truth am I unwilling to face? This is how the shadow transforms, not by force, but by understanding. You begin to notice subtle shifts. Conversations feel more authentic. Relationships deepen because you no longer hide behind politeness. Even solitude changes. It stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the essence of transformation. Your shadow is not in your way. It is your way. The darkness is not the absence of light, but the cradle of it. Only by walking into it do you learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move with it. So how do we live this truth? Begin with awareness. Notice when you're pretending. When you laugh, though you're hurt. When you say, "I'm fine," while something inside you screams. Awareness is the first form of love. Then, practice humility. It takes humility to admit that you are both noble and foolish, both compassionate and cruel, both fragile and resilient. To live as a whole being is to live as a paradox. And finally, practice courage. Because integration asks you to stand naked before yourself, to see the parts of your soul that don't fit your story. But remember, the truth never destroys what is real in you. It only burns away what was borrowed. In leadership, this awareness makes you human. You no longer need to dominate to feel strong, nor please to feel loved. You lead by presence, not performance. In relationships, it births empathy. You stop demanding perfection from others because you've learned to forgive your own chaos. You recognize that love is not found in idealizing another, but in seeing them, fully, shadow and all, and choosing to stay. In solitude, transformation becomes prayer. You learn to befriend your own silence. You sit in the soft flicker of candlelight and realize that peace was never the absence of noise, but the acceptance of your inner voice. This is what it means to live consciously, to allow both the divine and the damaged to exist within you, to stop fighting the currents of your own psyche and instead flow with them toward understanding. You will still stumble. You will still fall into old patterns. But each time you return with awareness, you return with more grace, because every descent into the shadow teaches you something new about the light. And soon you realize transformation is not a single event, but a rhythm, a constant death and rebirth of false selves into truer ones. This is the dance of the awakened soul, to walk through darkness, to carry light, and to know that both are sacred. There comes a moment after the storm, a stillness, not triumph, not ecstasy, but something quieter, truer. It's the moment when you no longer need to explain your healing, when you no longer chase light to prove that you've escaped the dark. You simply sit in yourself and feel whole. This is not the joy of victory, but the peace of understanding. You realize that every shadow you feared was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to complete you. Carl Jung once said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And now you understand what he meant. The fatigue that once crushed you was never a sign of weakness. It was your soul's way of asking for truth. You're not tired. You were spiritually drained from carrying only half of yourself. When you finally embraced what you ran from, your anger, your grief, your doubt, you stopped bleeding energy into resistance. You became unified, no longer split between who you are and who you pretend to be. And in that unity, life begins to breathe through you again. The world doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. The same noise, the same chaos, and yet you move through it differently. You no longer seek constant stimulation, because you've made peace with silence. You no longer fear endings, because you've seen how every ending is the soil of rebirth. The truth is simple now. You are both light and shadow, both wound and healer, both the question and the answer. You've stopped trying to purify yourself, and instead learned to humanize yourself, because holiness was never the absence of imperfection. It was the presence of compassion, and with that compassion, the world begins to soften. You see others not as threats or mirrors, but as fellow travelers, each carrying their own shadows, each longing to come home. The same awareness that heals you will allow you to heal others, not by saving them, but by seeing them, by standing beside them in silence, without judgment, without pretending to fix their pain. That is the echo of awakening. It reverberates beyond the self. Your peace becomes a refuge for others. Your honesty becomes permission. Your wholeness becomes hope. And so the circle closes, not with a loud finale, but with a quiet return. The candle burns low. The mirror reflects not perfection, but presence. You sit with yourself and realize you are no longer waiting to become someone else. The fatigue has lifted, not because you've conquered the world, but because you've stopped fighting your own soul. And as the dawn rises, slowly, softly, you feel it. You are not tired. You are finally at rest,